One of the most important elements of a story is its plot. But how is a good plot constructed? Plot is the framework that the rest of the story is built around, but for such a core part of the story, it's quite tricky to identify what makes a good one. Often, it's about what feels satisfying. A plot is a story's series of events that it is made of, but what makes a series of events compelling to follow? A plot is made of a few core elements. There's the situation, which consists of the world, characters, and their goals. There's the progression of how characters attempt to reach their goals and move past whatever obstacles get in their way. And there's the result of these actions and the resolution of these goals. These essential elements of a plot follow the three-act structure. The three-act structure is a well-known and simple way to describe a story structure. It consists of 3 acts, as you could probably guess from the name. Act 1 establishes the story. It introduces the world, characters, and important concepts. Introducing and fleshing out a story and its characters is important because it's how we get invested in them. Getting attached to the status quo of a character's life hooks us into caring for them. But the status quo isn't what the story is about. Act 1 also has the important job of starting the story with an inciting incident. This is an event in the story that takes the characters from their status quo to going on the journey of their story. The inciting incident is closely tied to the goal of the characters, since it establishes what the characters want. Maybe the characters lose something in the inciting incident, and they want it back. Maybe someone else asks them for help. Maybe a new threat has started to present itself to the characters. Essentially, the inciting incident establishes the main goal that motivates the characters on their journey. It has to be important enough to a character that they want to leave their comfortable lives behind. Act 2 is the middle of the story, and it covers how the characters pursue their goals. This can often be the meat of the story and the longest part of it. A wide variety of things can happen in the second act, depending on the story, but there are a few kinds of important things that can happen. Characters do a combination of doing actions to get closer to their goals, or facing obstacles that they either have to overcome or avoid. By overcoming obstacles, characters may grow stronger, not just physically but mentally. Avoiding obstacles or failing them may entail a character confronting what's too much for them, and they then have the challenge of having to find a new way to pursue their goals. So many things can happen in the second act, but a second act isn't just about the events that happen in the story, but how a character grows. A character can grow to overcome their challenges, or gain a stronger understanding of themselves by avoiding them and finding another path. Act 3 is the conclusion of the story. In this act, the character may do their final task before reaching their goal. This is often the climax of the story, where the stakes are highest and the characters are the most challenged. Partway into Act 3, the characters face the results of their actions. Sometimes the characters may succeed and reach their goals successfully. Sometimes the characters fail, or only get half of what they wanted. If they fail, maybe they realize their goal isn't actually what they wanted. Still, the characters may discover a new goal they could pursue, find something they missed that they needed, or they may realize that they have all they need and don't need to complete the goal. If an Act 3 includes a failure, it may be followed by success after the characters recover and grow from their failure. Act 3 is basically the result of the characters pursuing their goal. The story may continue after the third act, and the 3-act structure repeats a new set of goals, or the third act is truly the end of the character's story. A 3-part structure of beginning, middle, and end doesn't just apply to the plot of an entire story. It can apply to any level of a story. It's the 3-act structure all the way down. A story with multiple installments not only has 3 acts across the entire story, but also its smaller parts, like chapters or episodes. You can get even more granular in a story, and 3-part structure is still present. A single scene can have its own 3-act structure. Each scene has a setting and a small goal, and the characters that are trying to achieve that goal. That's the first act. The scene consists of characters trying to achieve that goal in its second act. The third act is the result of the characters' actions. The scene may either end with success, in which case the characters continue, or failure, in which case the characters must find something else to do. A story not only has an arc of goals, attempts, and results on a large scale, but also cycles of goals, attempts, and results on a smaller scale. A plot is not only a single 3-act structure, but also many smaller 3-act structures. Even on the scale of a single action that may last a split second, a 3-part structure is still present. For example, each action in a fight scene has its own arc. An action may start by establishing that a villain is trying to hit the hero, and the hero needs to reduce their harm. This is followed by the hero attempting to evade or defend, and the result can either be that the hero successfully escapes harm, or they get hit and face the consequences of the injury. Character arcs, just like plot arcs, follow a 3-act structure. The first act establishes the character, their personality, the world around them, and their goals. The story is about how a character tries to reach their goals, often growing in the process. A story concludes with a character either successfully reaching their goals or failing, and attempting to succeed in a different way. A character's core motivation is an important starting point for their arc. What is it that they want in life? The character may have multiple goals, but they may tie into each other. For example, a hero may have the goals of saving a kingdom and seeking the thrill of adventure. This hero seeks adventure while they attempt to save the kingdom, but the story may develop them to explore why they went to seek adventure, and make them more capable in saving the kingdom, making them a stronger person in the end. Everything a character does in a story comes from a motivation. Motivations can be simple, like the motivation to be alive, but they can also be social or come from the pursuit of self-esteem. Everything a character does has a reasoning, and then everything a character does helps them grow. A character may grow the most when they have two conflicting motivations, and they have to choose one over the other. Maybe a character wants to help another because they're motivated to do good, but they're also motivated by fear of failure, which makes them hesitant to help. The character may choose doing good over fear, causing them to grow, but if they choose fear for doing good, that may be something that haunts them later. When a character's conflicting motivations lead to tough choices, that leads to character growth, because choosing between motivations causes those motivations to change. The final act of a character arc is when we see what a character becomes in the end, and the results of their growth. Sometimes a character may succeed in achieving their original goal. This is simple, and while it can work if the character still grows in order to meet that goal, making the result of attempting that goal a failure can also be interesting. If a character fails their goal, they may at first be upset, but then they may learn that they didn't need that goal. There may be another goal for the character to achieve that they need more, or maybe they got what they needed over the course of their story. Often, a character's goal is just their interpretation of their motivation, but at the beginning of a story, their understanding of themselves may not be strong enough for them to have a goal that will satisfy them. When a character makes tough choices, they may gain a better understanding of what they need. A character wants something at the beginning of a story because they think that's what they need, but over the course of pursuing what they want, a character changes. By the end, they change into someone who may not have gotten what they wanted, but they are no longer a version of themselves that needed that thing, and so they are still satisfied. Character arcs can often be most interesting when it's not an arc that the character expected. Maybe a character expects to become brave, and what they really become is responsible, or strategic, or wise, or something else. I can't really discuss how the three-part structure works in my comic without getting into spoilers for chapters I haven't finished or chapters people may not have read. So I'm going to break down where the three-part structure can be seen in the first chapter of my comic. The first chapter of my comic is pretty much Act 1 of the story. The chapter introduces the characters, their relationships to each other, the world, and how it works. Most of Chapter 1 is dedicated to introducing the characters, without anything too plot-relevant happening. The inciting incident happens at the end of Chapter 1. Guyana, one of the protagonists, spots the ghost of her sister, who has been dead for several years. It's established that Guyana is a reaper, so she values giving souls a proper end, on top of her love for his sister. She tries to approach the ghost in order to say her final words to it, but before she can, a demon overwhelms her with thoughts of shame, and Guyana passes out. The inciting incident establishes that Guyana wants to talk to the ghost of her sister, but she can't because the demon won't let her. Her motivation for the rest of the story is to overcome the demon, and talk to her sister. The growth and results of that motivation are yet to be seen, but that's essentially the first act of Guyana's arc. Many things that Guyana does is an effort to overcome the demon, but she also has other motivations, such as doing good, but also making cautious choices, and not taking much more than she thinks she deserves. Many events in Act 2 likely put some of these motivations in competition with each other. As I discussed earlier, smaller levels of a story, including individual scenes, can have their own 3-act structure. This includes the inciting incident of Silver Road. The scene begins with the main characters on a trail at night, when Guyana spots the ghost of her sister. Act 2 of this scene consists of Guyana casting a spell so that everyone else can see the ghost, and then following the ghost as it wanders away. The final thing Guyana must do to get the ghost's attention is to make it aware of her presence and get closer, but this fails when the demon shows itself. This changes the story so that Guyana not only has the goal to talk to her sister, but also to overcome the demon. She still has the goal to talk to her sister, but that is put on hold until she can solve the goal of her demon. Even if Guyana did not succeed during the inciting incident, she still grows slightly as a character when she gains that insight that for some reason, she doesn't feel ready to talk to her sister again. Guyana has a long way to go, but she has still taken a step towards her goals. It feels like the structure of a plot is something that should have been meticulously designed over generations of storytelling. but I think a lot of what makes a good plot comes naturally to us humans. I've gone into detail describing the 3-act structure, but it can really be broken down into the idea of things having a beginning, middle, and end. You don't need to be an expert on story structure to know that. You don't even have to be someone like me, a student of story structure sharing what knowledge we know. Though really, are we not all students of story structure? Still, I found it interesting to analyze just how deep a 3-part structure goes in a story. It's not just the structure for a whole story. There are smaller and smaller 3-part arcs at nearly every level of the story. I can't say I think very deeply into plot structure consciously while writing my comic. I just write what seems to be a natural arc for the story to follow. My analysis of the 3-act structure is more about me finding a pattern in the natural way we create story structure, rather than being the framework that I build my stories around each time. Of all the major aspects of a story, plot is the one that's very important, but for me, it's hard to identify the difference between a good and bad plot. For a part of a story so structured, plots are very abstract. What I do feel confident about is that plots naturally follow many levels of 3-part structures, and that seems to be a solid way of telling a story. I hope you enjoy this overcomplicated definition of beginning, middle, end. Goodbye, everybody. Sam wishes you well.